Hello, good morning, and welcome to the final breakfast discussion tackling some of the key policy and economic issues discussed at the ANC's 53rd elective conference in Mangaung. I'm Karima Brown. This morning we will be joined by Planning Minister Trevor Manuel, who will be speaking to the National Development Plan. But before we do that, let's get an input from business from Reverend Sitsabo Dlamini. He is the CEO of Sitsabo Project Managers.
Thanks, Karima. Good morning, everybody. The business community in South Africa has traditionally supported efforts by the government to stimulate economic growth. Nowhere has this been brought into sharper focus than in the National Development Plan, to which we owe Minister Manuel's National Planning Commission a huge debt of gratitude. In President Zuma's political report to conference on Sunday, he mentioned that the National Development Plan articulates a program or a national vision of where the country is going. He said, the critical task now is to implement the plan. Minister Manuel has been involved with the economic policy of the African National Congress from the period before 1994, through the RDP, through GIE, through ASGISA, and now through the National Development Plan. So we hope, as the business community, that in his address this morning to this forum, he will be able to share with us some of his vision and some of his wisdom on how the National Development Plan seeks to overcome most of the obstacles and fundamental implementation challenges that we have seen with the previous policy propositions. Thank you very much.
That was, of course, Reverend Sitsabo Dlamini speaking there to us from Sitsabo Project Managers. Now, of course, the National Development Plan has been the focus of the nation's attention since the Commission has been formed and the task that has been laid out to them. Now, Minister Manuel handed over this plan on the 16th of August to the President, and the plan is now with Cabinet. And, of course, we heard President Jacob Zuma speaking on Friday, urging the conference to actually look at the implementation mechanisms around the plan. I'm not going to waste a lot of your time. Let me get the man of the moment, Minister Manuel, to tell us exactly how he thinks the delivery mechanisms are going to be put in place by the ANC's 53rd elective conference to operationalize this plan. Minister Manuel, ladies and gentlemen. Minister, let's go to the stage.
Do you want me to stand there? Okay, I was just getting settled.
Your last address.
Thank you very much, Karima. Good morning to all of you. Let me just take a moment and you know, the plan emerges from a decision taken 5 years ago at Polokwane. The idea of the Planning Commission was incorporated in the manifesto of the ANC going into the 2009 elections. A Planning Commission was established, drawn from people outside of government, and one person inside of government, the schizophrenic, that's me. Now the Deputy President of the ANC is also Deputy Chair of the Planning Commission, and that gives me a kind of edge over Cyril Ramaphosa. It's no bad place to be today. We started work in May of 2010. By June of 2011, we delivered a diagnostic. We took that to the nation. We then consulted on the process. By the 11th of November last year, we had a proposed plan in place. Again, we embarked on consultation on the 15th of August, handed this to the President. It's important to understand the plan. It's the first plan for the country, and it's important to understand in a number of different ways. One part of it is about ensuring that we complete and focus on implementation, and because in its nature it's not a government plan, it's a plan for the nation. It's fundamentally important that we involve communities in decisions and oversight. I think that's the first and most important plank, and that has been a big part of the communication to this conference. You've got 4,500 delegates representing all of the country, and if people are not involved, if people wait for government, you have a democracy that'll die on its feet. You need to energize a democracy, and that energy will come from people's participation in oversight over the kinds of services that they deal with in their everyday lives. That's one part of it. A second part of it is that in our analysis, and we've worked largely with existing policies, there are certain gaps or issues that need additional attention. One of those examples would be urbanization policy. We have massive and rapid urbanization in South Africa, and this is borne out by the results of Census 2011. But people come into cities where, on the one hand, the spatial norms are still largely those of apartheid. We still live in group areas in the main. And secondly, we aren't accommodating people coming in. And people will continue to flock into cities, and we need an urban policy that absorbs people differently. We provide not just housing, but a built environment that's very different, and that is a centrally important part of it. The third part is, of course, how we expand the economy and grow jobs in the economy. So we're dealing with some gaps, some omissions, but the focus is always on implementation. Our basic message is that if the focus, as we've done in the past, is merely on policy, we don't actually get far down the track. We need to have a set of measurements in place that allow us to focus on improvements. We must also link chains differently. So if you look from the plan at education, we start with early childhood development. In fact, we start before early childhood development and try and understand what should happen in the lives of infants, issues like nutrition, cognitive development, then through the early childhood development, through the schooling system, into higher education, further education, innovation, and then laying a different kind of basis for what happens in the economy. We've drawn a lot of policy areas together in a way that frequently government departments can't do, and I think that that's an innovation that will also allow us to deal with some issues in detail. Going forward, there will be work that'll be different. If you take an issue like food security, it's a big issue globally. We need to understand not just land reform and people on land in agriculture. We need to understand the environment that supports communities in rural areas. We need to understand the utilization of resources like water and land itself. We need to understand what kind of chemical interventions are needed. And then you need to understand the infrastructure that allows people to get product from the farms to markets, especially small farmers. All of that will require a very different, detailed approach, the kinds of issues we haven't done work on yet, but the seeds of which are embedded in the first National Development Plan, which is being discussed by conference here. It's a very good moment, and the reception for the plan has been exceedingly warm in this conference. Thank you.
Welcome back. You're watching CNBC Africa live from Mangaung, the ANC's 53rd elective conference. My guest today, of course, is Minister Trevor Manuel. He's been talking to us about the National Development Plan. And let's not waste any more time and get straight into those questions from the floor. Can we have the first question, please?
Yeah, Minister, the National Development Plan seeks to operationalize the propositions through the 3 levels of government: local government, provinces, and national, and also the SOEs. Now, we have seen in the past delivery of services suffering through these different levels of government, which culminated in a number of service delivery protests. Now, how does the NDP seeks to deal with the capacity issues in the public sector, number one? And then number two, what sort of criteria will be used, or does the NDP proposes, in terms of deciding on which projects gets implemented where with respect to all these levels of government?
You know, the first question, Reverend, on the tiers of government, I think that one of the issues that we need to do is use information differently. Now, let me just cite an example, and prioritization needs to happen in a number of different ways. Stats SA, in releasing the results of Census 2011, have actually put in the hands of all of our people the most remarkably powerful tool. There's an app for your iPad or an Android facility, even for the Mobi platform, or on the internet, that'll give you a breakdown by ward. Now suddenly, the mystique of the integrated development plans is gone. Communities can know exactly what is happening in their ward. And so when municipalities reconstruct their IDPs in the future, they must know that they're dealing with communities who are highly informed. The tragedy for me is that people aren't using that application as extensively as they might, but it's there. And so, you know, I'd like to encourage everybody to understand just how powerful the tool is. So you can understand percentages of a ward that have access to water, sanitation, tarred roads, all of those things are there. And I think you can then begin to reconstruct priorities differently. Now, in the way in which we've argued issues, active citizenship, leadership throughout society, and effective government all hang together. If you ask me what our theory of change is, it's understanding those kinds of issues as being what will give effect to the myriad of policies adopted by government. In respect of efficient utilization of financial resources, it's another issue for which we need to be a lot more accountable. So in the area where you operate in project management, for instance, what is the margin that a contractor should have on a job? Is the contractor capable? Is there adequate oversight of the job? Those are fundamentally important questions that actually spread the money differently. These are, I think the tools are there. We now have to be able to demonstrate how they work and ensure that the demonstration effect of that allows us to generalize off learning, because the second message of the plan is learning by doing. It's not just more and more policy, it's also starting to do in a way where we learn as we proceed. In respect of the criteria, the National Planning Commission doesn't determine the criteria. We think democratic and democratically elected government needs to be accountable for their selection of projects, and that makes a lot of difference. We can facilitate, catalyze, and ensure that the information is available, because, you know, they say sunlight is the best disinfectant. If people see what needs to be done, they exercise the choice. Similarly, if we close the loop, because the statute in local government lays the basis for accountable and participatory local government. But frequently we take the views of people in IDPs and we never tell them what we can do when. You close the loop and people participate very differently.